Session G, area G is War on Whistleblowers. This is Jess and Tom.
National Defense Authorization. I think there's also something far more insidious and pernicious going on here. If you're actually charging the whistleblowers under the Espionage Act, what you're really doing is a direct assault on the First Amendment. You're using the Fourth Amendment, right, to actually chip away whatever's left. It's foundational to this country. So if a government employee cannot actually raise the question of government illegality, if they actually have a reasonable belief, this is fundamental to whistleblower, a reasonable belief, they were exposed to government wrongdoing, they're eyewitness to wrongdoing and malfeasance, they're exposing it. Whether it's in proper channels, outside of proper channels, it still falls under the laws that protect, quote unquote, protect whistleblowers. The problem is, in this, you're talking about an intelligence community that runs in secret. And they get, in essence, especially in the current climate, they get to define what's secret, what isn't. And essentially, more is becoming secret, not less. But now you're talking about a whole alternative structure in terms of law, which really isn't law. It's made up based on what they say is or isn't. So the last thing they want to be is exposed. So remember, in this country, we're not founded on secrecy. We're founded on openness and transparency. For all the faults the Constitution had, that was fundamental. And that's really what's at stake. So if you can silence the whistleblowers, remember, what's the other thing government's really after? They don't want this stuff reported on. Where does it get reported? It gets reported in the media, whether it's mainstream media or whether it's alternative media. So if you start cutting off the very sources of information,
secrecy as the national state policy in terms of executing foreign and domestic policy. I mean, he's taken Bush to a whole new level.
I agree. The problem is none of our officials can really be prosecuted.
Well, they've all conferred immunity on themselves, so that's
right.
right.
That's right. That's right. You can't take them to Germany.
They all have conferred immunity on the Congress. They've gotten congressional immunity, at least in terms of secret domestic
I'm
surveillance.
above the law.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
In other lawsuits, they've used the state secrets doctrine to shut down lawsuits, and Mike can attest to this. I think I have two of the surviving cases right now against Rumsfeld on torture, but it's really, really hard. And Mike can talk about litigation also, trying to litigate this stuff with a blindfold on and your arms tied behind your back up against the Goliath that is the government.
And actually, that was something that the Obama campaign ran against,
right?
But has actually, utilized the state secrets privilege in exactly the same way, and actually even in a more pernicious way. We have a case in Southern California. I'm sure many of you heard about an FBI informant came public and said that he was sent into a number of mosques on fishing expeditions. So the ACLU is filing a lawsuit there about FBI domestic surveillance of Americans in the United States. No foreign element involved at all. And the Obama administration has claimed state secrets over that case. So here, most of the other cases are rendition where there's some foreign element, torture where there's some foreign element. This is a purely domestic case that the government is trying to say it's a state secret how our domestic law enforcement activities are used against Americans.
So way I thought of the history of the SEALs. We've been talking lately about the contradiction apparently between Obama's promise of transparency and the increase, not only continued, but increased opacity actually of the government invisibly against whistleblowers, against leaks, et cetera, But that goes along with what he's inherited and even enhanced in the way of surveillance of the public, which somebody else, by the way, mentioned the other day. And remember how much that's along with surveillance of our consumer habits by Amazon, Google, the whole internet, enormously, which is undoubtedly shared. In other words, our Facebook data is undoubtedly shared with the public. So it turns out, I just realized the other day that when Obama, I don't know if he foresaw this, but the way it's turned out, when he was talking about this is going to be the most transparent administration, he meant transparency of us. We were going to be transparent to the government, and the government was going to be
That's a good one.
transparent to us. Reverse reversing what it should be in a democracy, where we have our private information. The government is relatively open to us.
This is where it's so incredibly Orwellian. You really have to look at the language. It's really doublespeak. It's the spin. It truly is. Yeah. The transparency's for them. They want full access. Yeah.
Your transparency, remember our transparency. Our transparency is what he said.
So what are our alternatives to Obama? I mean, the Republicans. And so what can we, who want to be left of Obama, drag him a little bit in our direction? How do we do this in the next month?
I'm Jewish, but
I'd take anything at this point. Are you familiar with Root Strikers, Larry Lessig, Change Congress? Anybody? Okay.
I know Larry Lessig.
Larry Lessig was essentially the founder of the Creative Commons movement, was fighting to liberalize copyright, gave up on it after accomplishing a lot to start a new fight. This is a book he put out recently. And his thinking is, whatever your issue is, government going after whistleblowers, anything government related, global warming, whatever it is, it will never get fixed until we fix the republic so that it's once again representative. And he goes through a lot of the different potential ways to do it. The only one that he mentions that I think could work is a constitutional convention. Very hard to call.
Dangerous.
But and dangerous, and that's probably a good thing. That's the only legal way of doing it. The only other thing I can think of, which you also have probably never heard of, is Jim Bell's Assassination Politics, which is
Say again?
Assassination Politics. It's by Jim Bell. It's a sort of crypto anarchist way of changing the government. You can look it up. But I think this is great stuff.
Yeah, the paradox / irony here is that the government's in violation of its own constitution. So how do you hold a government? It becomes a criminal organization. How then do you hold a criminal organization to account when it's the very organization that has the reins of power? And it's increasing league with the corporate side of America.
well, normally you would have congressional oversight.
Yes,
and they would help hold
normally.
the executive
Normally you
accountable.
would. So what's the only other branch left then is judicial.
But they're being shut down by the state secrets privilege, and
Right, because it's secret to reveal or disclose
you
criminal
have the
activity.
state, the media, but a lot of them have been co-opted. You have the alternative media, and I'm a writer for both mainstream and alternative, and that gets, I mean, with the alternative media, it took a long time to get traction. I get a lot of trolls when I write about assassination being problematic and about Tom Drake's case and stuff like that, even on a leading progressive Huffington Post and Daily Kos and progressive science. And that's the alternative media.
But there's the Occupy. You know? This is the new phenomenon. It's not even a year old now. It's about a half a year old. And as I sat waiting for an interview about the National Defense Authorization Act, I'd said, now if this interviewer is smart, he's going to ask me why. We thought it was, you know, the crazies in the Senate. We thought it was the Lindsey Grahams and the Liebermans, and they had somehow caused Carl Levin to be. Well, it turned out that it was the White House. Carl Levin got up and said, you know, you object to this, but we had protections for U.S. citizens in the draft, but when we got back from the White House, they say, no, take the protections out for the U.S. citizens.